If you did want to move around the neck, right? You can absolutely do that and just experiment. So what I like to do with one-to-one students is take a song, go over how we can develop those ideas slowly so that over time, right, you get faster and faster and faster at, doing that, in the moment, okay? So that's exactly what we're gonna do today. We're gonna take a Bob Marley song, stir it up, and we're gonna develop our soloing ideas, and then I will let you run wild with the backing track and taking these ideas and exploring, what do you like best? I'm a blues person, right? I've got a lot of blues in my playing, so how do I take those concepts and put it to this progression, right? This major progression. The bass line is kind of just really simple major arpeggios. How do you do that? Well, maybe you like arpeggios, and how do you, bring those into the mix and really noodle around using that as your framework, right? So different strokes for different folks. But anyways, if that sounds fun to you and you want to develop your guitar soloing skills against a famous song that we all know and love, grab your guitar and let's jump in. So we're going to keep this really simple and quickly break down the progression. It's just 3 chords on a loop for the entire song. Then we're going to break down these 3 large frame ideas that are really expansive. So they bring in a lot of genres, a lot of styles, and then we're basically just going to run wild with those 3 ideas, blending them as we see fit, or glomming onto one and saying, ooh, I like that kind of concept. Let's develop that in my solo, right? So to start with the progression, it's just A, D, and then E. Back to A, D, and then E, right? I will give you the progression right here, right? I'll also flash it when we start using it, and I'll also put it in the description so that you have that, right? Kind of a backup, right? If you missed the link here, go to the description, you will have that backing track, right? But the chords are A, D, E, back to A, right? And there's that bass line. And it's just running, the entire song, right? So A, D, and E. They become important because if you want to mess around with arpeggios and stuff, you want to layer those arpeggios over the specific chords, that you've got ideas for. You're going to want that progression kind of baked into your brain, okay? So when we look at that, just to kind of start with the first idea we're going to be developing, A, D, and E. That would be a 1-4-5 progression, right? If we look at the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 4th note in the scale, 5th note in the scale. So 1, 4, 5, right? A, D, E. Root note, 4th note, 5th note. Okay? 1, 4, 5. That's the same idea as a pretty traditional blues progression. However, very different rhythm and approach to a 1-4-5 progression than like a 12-bar blues, right? So just keep that in mind. But the chords, all right, are within that 1-4-5 realm. The first idea, we always want to boil things down to like the most basic thing to start, is just approaching this with a pentatonic. Now, if you don't know how to map the neck using pentatonic scales, I think that's a really valuable tool. I do have a video on that I think is very helpful. I'll link that right here. But if we took that basic pentatonic shape, right, when we think major, I always just think like start with your pinky on this shape. Right, but that obviously falls in there. That would be the full shape, bringing in that F sharp. Okay, so I would start right there with pentatonics. Now, in the description, as always, if you know my videos, I put free PDFs, no strings attached, no emails, no nothing, in the description. Download that. That will be very helpful for you because I don't want you coming back to this video every single time you want to play with this idea. I want you to become a better guitar player. In the PDF is a full map of the neck using the A major pentatonic scale. So I'm going to show you 5 shapes that will take up the entirety of the neck individually, right? You'll see each shape individually, and then I'll show you a full map where they're connected. Now it's up to you to play around and experiment with moving through those shapes over the progression so that you can get more familiar with each shape, and you can figure out how to move horizontally and connect them, all right? On top of that, you've also got a map of the neck using the A major, the standard A major scale, right? So pentatonic shapes would be 5 notes, and in this context, within the A major scale, and then the A major scale would have 7 notes. They're both important, they both provide different flavors, but you'll have that map, right, using the 5-shape framework, and you'll have every single A major, D major, and E major triad shape on the 4-3-2 string set and the 3-2-1 string set. It's okay if you don't know triads, but they're perfect for arpeggios. All right, so this will allow you to play with some arpeggios if you're not familiar with them already. Right, so 4-3-2 string set, D, G, and B strings, 3-2-1, G, B, and high E. So that'll allow you to, right, break the A major, chord into, that, right, into arpeggios. So you can play around with, those concepts in your solos. We'll get to that in a second, all right? But the first framework, okay, the first thing that we're messing around with, the first concept, is the pentatonic scale. I will play with this with you on top of this backing track at the end of the video. But for example, taking something bluesy that would be pentatonic, and trying those licks and those flavors right, trying those flavors over this progression, okay? Because like I said, we've got this 1-4-5. Those are kind of my roots. That's my essence, right? Some bluesy stuff. So I'm going to come back to that a lot. But the next concept, right, to just keep things rolling. I don't want to waste a ton of time here, breaking down different pentatonic licks. Use your own pentatonic licks that you like and use them in the key of A major, of course, right? Do not use, A minor. It will not sound as good. You can also use the A major, right? So the difference would be you get these flavors. That's not in the pentatonic, right? Pentatonic would skip this note right here, right? On the B string, right? The D note. The pentatonic would skip that, right? So if we're using these top 3 strings, there's the major scale, there's the pentatonic, there's the major, there's the pentatonic, all right? So that would be the next piece, is playing around with those major flavors. You can still have a bit of a bluesy element, right? But you can throw in those major flavors so that all of a sudden there is a unique and different texture, okay? Scale runs, don't be afraid to throw in something that, if you're too repetitive, can sound monotonous, but can break up. Right, can break things up even though, oh wait, scales can sound so boring. Well, if you're just only sticking to the scales, yeah, they can, but if you break them up with something flavorful, they can sound pretty cool. So like I said, you'll have that map as well. So you have both maps, figuring out how you can noodle around. But listen, I like using that basic pentatonic shape as a framework. It's a beautiful thing. If you haven't checked out, I just put out a lesson about this kind of 9-minute blues routine. Again, I'm pointing over here, so I'll link it over here. That'll help you kind of figure out soloing in that framework. So if you're newer to soloing, that might be really helpful for you. But keeping things into a small shape can be really helpful, right? Anyways, that's a good little concept up there. The last thing, like I said, let's get through this, we can get to the fun stuff, playing over this progression, would be trying arpeggios. So, really simply, right? So there's A, there's D, E, but here's A as well. And here's D as well. And here's D as well. Here's E as well. Right? There's a, you have all these shapes because of the PDF under your fingers, so, you can, right, you can structure things around A major, arpeggios. You can mess around with the D major, that flavor, so that when you're moving around, you can play around with those, okay? There's basically three, again, these are huge frameworks to play around with, especially once you start incorporating the entire neck. This would allow you to kind of bring that mentality into any solo and like, okay, well, let me try some pentatonics first just to kind of get in a rhythm, and then, okay, let me bring in my major scale. That for me is like enough. I use arpeggios in smaller frameworks to kind of structure myself around the neck. I can't say I always use them in the truest sense, in my solos, but if you really love that flavor, you have that capacity to say, I'm gonna start there, or I'll finish there, I'll build there, things like that. But with that, I'm gonna turn on the backing track. We're gonna play around with this. You'll see what I'm talking about, and then you will be able to run wild. And this could be an hour-long session of developing your soloing ideas with this backing track. We all know, jamming out is like the most fun thing on instruments. So let's put that on and we'll jump in. Okay, really quick break to remind you all that if you're enjoying this video, you find the concepts in this lesson to be very helpful, you understand that they will benefit you down the line throughout your entire guitar playing journey, to actually click the like button and subscribe to the channel. That is very helpful for me. It gets this video out to more people. Of course, it just boosts my self-esteem, but it also allows me to continue to make these and continue on my own, lesson making journey and putting everything out for free on YouTube, so you all can become better guitar players and check out everything I've got coming in the future. All right, so thank you, I appreciate it. And now back to the lesson. All right, so the backing track is about to come in right now. Here it is. And we're gonna start with that first concept we went over, the pentatonic framework, the pentatonic concept. And I think this is a really great way to start things anyways, because in so many guitar solos, and a great approach to guitar solos is starting more simple and getting more complex, starting slow and then building speed. And go back and listen to your favorite 10 to 20 guitar solos. There are exceptions to the rule, but this is a common theme, right? That first big bend and then doing something, right? Well, that counts because you're hitting this note, taking a second to say, how do I want to develop my idea? And then running from there. Taking a phrase and using that as your anchor point and developing that idea. All right, so let's bring that into this solo with the pentatonic framework. Simple, right? You can go all day with that, right? Good reminder that this simple pentatonic shape is very powerful. It's why it's a part of so many great solos. So very powerful shape. If you did want to move around the neck, right? You can absolutely do that and just experiment. If it's just you alone in this room, you don't have to put pressure on yourself. However, something to think about when you're in a jam scenario, if you're, like me and you get tense and I want to really show off and I want to sound good, take a breath and try to focus on melody. It still sounds good because it's working well with the progression, but you don't have to go nuts, right? So again, go wild, spend an hour on pentatonics for all I care. Then right? The major scale. All I did was add a few notes, but keeping that kind of little bend as like my anchor point. Right? So I'm putting in these scale runs, but because I'm adding some zest, it doesn't sound too monotonous to me. You might say, that's not the flavor I like, then no worries, you don't have to use it. All right? Now the last one, like I said, my approach isn't usually arpeggios. But if you just focus on the A major arpeggios, that's a great place to start. They'll always work. Arpeggio right there, simple. Simple arpeggios. Throwing in the D major and E major elements. Like I said, I don't usually use straight arpeggios as a framework, more of a way to map the neck. Right, so I can use little shapes to kind of pinpoint a place I want to move to, and I can also use them as a way to, identify key notes. So here's A. There's D. So if I wanted to move through the scale and pause on D or E as they come up, I could do that with arpeggios as a framework, if that makes sense. But it's up to you. Use arpeggios, make them sound more musical and flow better than I do. Use the pentatonic, use the major scale. They're all available to you. I'm going to pause this, but just recognize that you have a lot of tools in your toolbox. If you're just using those three concepts as your framework for soloing inside of that progression, all right? And again, that framework works for a lot of other progressions. We'll try out the pentatonic. It doesn't sound as good as I'd like it to. Try the major scale. Try arpeggios, things like that. However, what I will say is as progressions change, the rhythm changes, the flavors change, the textures change, so that's something to keep in mind. And if you liked this, put a song that you want to mess around with and that you want to jam with, and we can break down the structure. So this progression is very different than the Hotel California progression, right? There's way more chords inside of that progression, which is different than the Little Wing progression, which is different than Wagon Wheel, yada, 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 et cetera, et cetera. There's different, vibes, so to speak, for every song. So let me know if that's something you're interested in. And as I said, download the PDF. That's super helpful. And of course, like and subscribe. Helpful for me. I think helpful for you because of all the stuff that's out there and all the stuff that's coming out. And anyways, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for stopping by. Peace.